Good evening, this is the evening from the New York Times for Monday, August 3, 2026. I'm Wet Moser, and here's the latest at the end of the day. We begin in the Pacific Northwest, where a record-breaking wildfire season has exploded into what authorities are calling the largest natural disaster in the history of Spokane County. Over the weekend, at least 3 wildfires ballooned across Spokane County, Washington, burning more than 5,390 acres and forcing the evacuation of about 60,000 people, that's roughly a tenth of the area's residents. Nearly 1,000 firefighters were on the lines by Sunday, racing to take advantage of weather conditions that had slightly improved, though forecasters warned those conditions could worsen again by Wednesday. At a news conference yesterday, officials reported no deaths, injuries, or missing people so far, but they cautioned those figures could change. Major General Gent Welsh, the Washington National Guard commander, put it starkly, "When the sun rises in the morning, I think we're going to be in shock to see some of the scenes that emerge. It's still too early to determine the full extent of the damage, but hundreds of structures have already been destroyed." This isn't an isolated incident. Residents in the Pacific Northwest have dealt with a record-breaking wildfire season largely because of excessive drought and heat. More than 1,000 fires have burned in Washington alone this year, covering about 425,000 acres. From the flames in the West, we turn to Washington, D.C., where a high-stakes nomination battle appears to have reached a resolution. The 2 Republican senators who had threatened to block Todd Blanche's confirmation as Attorney General, John Cornyn of Texas and Tom Tillis of North Carolina, said Monday they would support his nomination after the Justice Department committed in writing to abandoning elements of a deal it struck with President Trump to resolve his lawsuit against the IRS. The senators had vowed they would not confirm Blanche unless he provided written assurances that the department had formally scrapped a planned $1.8 billion fund to pay people who claimed the government had persecuted them, and that he would narrow the scope of the immunity from IRS scrutiny that was granted to Trump. In a joint statement, Cornyn and Tillis said they were pleased that Blanche issued a memo and statement Sunday night appearing to meet those demands. But critics, including legal analysts and former Justice Department officials, say the documents Blanche posted to social media to ease his path to confirmation have loopholes, and leave the perk most valuable to the president largely untouched. The documents address the fund and narrow some protections, but the core immunity for Trump and his inner circle from IRS audits remains largely intact. When asked about the assurances provided by Blanche, his former personal lawyer, Trump said simply, "I didn't look at it." The rebellion against Blanche's nomination, now seemingly contained, at no point fundamentally questioned Trump's new protections from the IRS, a remarkable expansion of executive privilege that shields the president and his allies from tax scrutiny in ways that have no modern precedent. In other Washington news, Representative Max Miller, an Ohio Republican seeking a third term, defiantly denied allegations that he abused his ex-wife and toddler daughter, and refused to drop out of his race. In a livestream Sunday that lasted about 20 minutes, Miller appeared agitated and at times seemed to be laboring to read from a script as he categorically denied the accusations by his ex-wife, Emily Moreno. The lengthy public statement prompted Moreno's father, Senator Bernie Moreno, also an Ohio Republican, to issue a public rebuke of Miller. And the House Ethics Committee concluded in a damning report Monday that there was substantial reason to believe that Representative Chuck Edwards, Republican of North Carolina, violated House rules related to sexual harassment in hostile workplaces. The report found that Edwards engaged in persistent unprofessional and inappropriate conduct towards 2 young female staffers, including showering them with lavish gifts and affection. The committee recommended that Edwards be censured by the House. Now to a public health story that's been building across 9 states. Health officials in Michigan, which has been at the center of a cyclosporiasis outbreak, said 2 deaths have been linked to the intestinal illness, the first fatalities associated with this outbreak. Cyclosporiasis is caused by a parasite, Cyclospora, which spreads through food or water contaminated with human feces. The 2 people who died had significant underlying health conditions that may have been impacted by cyclosporiasis and dehydration, officials said. The infection causes lengthy bouts of diarrhea, which can be dangerous for vulnerable groups including infants, older adults, and those who are pregnant or have weakened immune systems. The outbreak has been traced to iceberg lettuce supplied by Taylor Farms, according to the CDC. Michigan alone has reported 11,234 cases and 193 hospitalizations. Nationally, this is the worst year on record for cyclosporiasis in the U.S. The CDC is investigating or has confirmed more than 18,000 cases in 45 states, with 423 hospitalizations. We stay with the military for a story about due process conducted in the shadows. Last year, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth issued an order that effectively forced all trans troops out of the military. Some chose to fight the order, taking their cases to special separation boards. These boards follow the same process the military uses to determine whether to kick out service members who abuse drugs or beat their spouses, with levels of security and silence usually reserved for state secrets. Sometimes the service members are kept out of their own hearings. An Army Reserve lawyer who has represented dozens of trans service members described the experience. The proceedings are opaque, the rules of evidence are loose, and the outcome feels predetermined. It's a system designed for misconduct cases, repurposed for identity, and the service members caught in it say they're being pushed out not for anything they've done, but for who they are. Let's run through more top news from around the country. In Utah, when President Trump sharply reduced the size of Bears Ears National Monument by more than 1.2 million acres, he justified it by saying recreation there was virtually impossible. You can't go hunting, you can't go fishing, you can't do anything, you can virtually not even walk on it, Trump said during a ceremony in the Oval Office. But documents reviewed by the New York Times show officials knew otherwise. Recreation was not only possible but actively managed and enjoyed. In politics, the author of the Democratic National Committee's recently released 2024 autopsy says a chapter was left out of the final report. A dispute over that chapter between the author and the DNC has added to the party's turmoil as it tries to look forward, not backward. The missing chapter reportedly addresses internal party dynamics and fundraising structures that the author believes were central to the defeat. In Idaho, at least 3 people were killed and 7 injured in a shooting Saturday at a recently opened In-N-Out Burger in Twin Falls. Authorities named 24-year-old Chad Williams as the gunman, who died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Police Chief Matthew Hicks said Williams acted alone, but possible motives are still being investigated. The shooting sent a shopping center into chaos as people fled from stores and restaurants. Back in Washington, President Trump's proposed 250-foot-tall Triumphal Arch would intrude on views at dozens of historic sites around the Capitol, according to an assessment by National Park Service staff. The edifice would alter the skyline to such an extent that it would disrupt the symbolic relationship between the Lincoln Memorial and Arlington National Cemetery, obstruct sightlines from the Kennedy gravesite and Robert E. Lee's home, and alter what official documents called one of the most magnificent views in Washington at the National Cathedral, for miles away. In Hollywood, the superhero boom supposedly ended years ago, but Spider-Man apparently didn't get the memo. Spider-Man, Brand New Day, the 11th big-budget Spider-Man movie from Sony Pictures since 2002, sold $360 million in tickets at the North American box office from Thursday through Sunday, one of the biggest domestic openings ever, on par with Avengers: Endgame. Directed by Destin Daniel Cretton, the film is heading for an $875 million global opening. And in geography news, formerly called Nauru, one of the world's smallest countries has renamed itself Nauru to better reflect how it's pronounced in the island's language. The 8-square-mile South Pacific nation, with about 11,000 people, unanimously approved the change in Parliament in May. It's the second smallest full member state of the United Nations, ahead of only Monaco. Now, time to unwind. The third season of Ted Lasso, which follows the American coach of an English soccer team, was the most watched original streaming show of 2023. That success added to a breakout for musical theater veteran Hannah Waddingham, who returns Wednesday as Rebecca, the team's owner, for the show's 4th season. Waddingham, who stands 6 feet 2 inches tall in heels, has a head-turning presence and a 4-octave vocal range. The daughter of a river police officer and an opera singer, she plays Rebecca with poshness and ruthlessness. This girl, Waddingham remembered thinking when she read the pilot script, "You're delicious." Off camera, colleagues describe her as quite a goofy nugget, nothing like the formidable Rebecca. And high in the foothills of the Wallowa Mountains in eastern Oregon, there's a kaminka, a traditional Japanese folk house. Filled with shoji screens and tatami mats, it uses a post and beam system, with some parts more than 200 years old, brought from the home prefecture of one of its owners. Many such houses in Japan sit empty because of earthquake building codes and shrinking populations in rural areas. Efforts are underway to save them, with some being exported to the US, where they can be shipped and rebuilt for about $500,000. It's a remarkable preservation project, dismantling heritage homes piece by piece, shipping them across the Pacific, and reassembling them in the American West. For your dinner table conversations, some of America's greatest natural wonders lie outside its national parks, slot canyons, lava tubes, gorges, and more on other US-owned public land, minus the crowds of Yellowstone or Yosemite. Hungarian photographer Sylvester Mako creates surrealist photos that place celebrities in the blurred boundary between imagination and reality. His work captures belief itself, that interior, personal, ineffable thing, translating it into multiple exposures and ghost-like transparencies. Olga Soffer, who died in June at 83, left her department store job at Abraham & Straus in Brooklyn, became an archaeologist, and unearthed startling revelations about Ice Age clothing and gender roles, proving that prehistoric people wove textiles, wore tailored garments, and had complex social structures far earlier than we thought. And a crushing economy in New York City is creating a fresh barrier to Gen Z love. From $130 dinners to expensive cocktails and exorbitant movie tickets, young adults say dating has become a luxury they can barely afford. What to do tonight? Cook an intensely savory tapenade pasta salad, made creamy by adding pasta water to the dressing. Stop procrastinating with advice from our Well newsletter. Set your future self up for success by removing productivity obstacles, because the intention-action gap between what we mean to do and what we actually do is where stress lives. Read Voices from the Kitchen, a chef's volume of oral histories told by 27 immigrants who have worked for Mark Meyer, a slim, modest book in the vein of Stud Sterkel's working that everyone who eats out regularly should know about. Dress Your Age. Vanessa Friedman explains how our wardrobes need to evolve with our lives and senses of self, or the effect may be as much internal as external. Watch the 4-part documentary series Once Upon a Time in Space, one of our 8 picks on TV this week. Change your toilet seat or buy a bidet with help from Wirecutter. And play today's Spelling Bee, Wordle, and Mini Crossword. One last thing, starting with Saturday Night Live in 1995, Will Ferrell and Molly Shannon have been working together for more than 30 years. Their most recent projects are the new Netflix series The Hawk and A Couple of Pizzas. We invited the two comedians into our kitchen to cook pies and talk. They told us about their favorite chains, which SNL cast members they'd hire to work in a restaurant, and why salt and vinegar chips and pineapple are good to eat before doing voice work. You can watch it on our site. Have a delectable evening. Thanks for reading. This has been the evening from the New York Times. I'm Wet Moser. See you tomorrow.